Hello everybody, so it's metal roofing time on the timber frame carport project, and I wanted to make a quick video to talk about, I think, one of the most important things you can do to put up a nice straight metal roof, and that is to install a string guide. And as you can see, that string runs all the way down the eave line, or maybe you could call it the drip line, and this is one of the best things I think you can do to get a high quality roof install. So let me climb up on the ladder a little bit more and we'll talk about this in some detail. Okay, so we're up here topside looking at the metal roof, and this is the very first panel I installed, and it surprisingly takes a lot of work and measurements and prep to get it built up to the point where you can do your first panel, but here it is. And from this view you can see my string line. And when people put on metal roofs, I think one of the biggest challenges is keeping the panels straight and starting them from one end and coming out at the other end with your panels straight and the way you want them, not getting them crooked, not losing your spacing rhythm, but just getting everything to come out correctly. Where a lot of people go wrong is they will line up their first panel with their gable, and then they will try and line up every panel on the previous panel and work their way down the roof. And if you're lucky, that might just work out, but when you do it that way, you end up building up a little bit of error with each panel, and by the time you get 4 or 5 panels down the roof, you can be way the heck off. And so that's a tough way to try and do things. The way I like to look at these roofs is to think about what's going to be the most important line people will notice, what's going to be the most difficult line to keep straight, where you need to minimize error, where you could run into problems because error has blown up. And that really, where things go wrong is almost always along the drip line, along the eave. You might see some roofs where it's got a kind of a step pattern at the edge where the panels don't quite line up. Might look like a saw blade, because people start by lining up at their gable, and then they get partway down the roof and they realize, hey, I'm veering way off course. I need to move some panels back up or back down, and all of a sudden you get a stair pattern going down the edge. And so one way to avoid all of these problems is to set up a string guide down along your drip line and follow that religiously for every single panel. And what I normally like to do is set up that string so it's about 1/8 inch below where the panel needs to stop, and then I just kind of eyeball that gap as I go down. Every new panel I put on, I'll slide it down until it gives me about that 1/8 of an inch gap. I know it's good. Then I screw it down and move on to the next panel. I've been doing that for years. It's always worked out great. It's I think an easy way to come out with a really nice straight roof along this edge where you're going to notice, where everybody else is going to notice. You get a nice straight even line, no jagged edges, and it just works out great. Now when you do this, what you're kind of giving up is perfect alignment on your gable ends, but it turns out that's not a big deal anyways, because once I'm done putting up the panels, I'm going to put a piece of trim over here called a Denver gable trim, and it actually comes up over and then down the side of my fascia, and that's going to basically form my gable detail. If for any reason I was crooked with that panel on the gable, all of that's going to be hidden under that Denver gable trim. And so this is the place where you want to allow errors. This is the place where you want to allow things to be a little bit crooked, because you're going to hide that stuff. No one will ever see it. You'll never know. And maybe if your building was perfect, everything would come out perfect, but chances are it's going to be a little bit off. this is the place where you want to hide those errors, under that Denver gable trim. So that's the main thing I wanted to talk about. In this case, you can see this, how I'm holding the string here. I just got a little piece of wood with a nail, and it's spaced out from my gable fascia board by the amount I know it needs to be, and I just screw that to the fascia and it sticks out. Here's an example one I've made for a previous project where things were a little more complicated. I forget what about this was more complicated, but I actually had to reach out and up with the string, and you can see I put little saw grooves on that block of wood to hold the string where I wanted to. But that's another example of how you can set up a string guide to hold your the string running down the drip line. And you know, these are always going to be a little bit custom and specific to the job, but it's just a couple pieces of scrap wood and some screws, and it's just super easy and quick to set these up. So I highly recommend using this method. The last thing I wanted to talk about here are your screws. One of the most common failures with a roof is people who overdrive those screws. And I think a lot of people love driving those screws in until they see that rubber gasket squish out. That's a mistake. That's the wrong way to do it, because what that does is it exposes that rubber gasket to sunlight and the elements, and it's going to deteriorate a whole lot quicker. So when you put these screws in, what you want to do is just watch carefully. And with my eyesight, I have to kind of peek over my glasses to see this, but you'll see that rubber washer just kind of begin to plump up a little bit as it gets squeezed down. That's when you want to stop. That means you've made contact, you've sealed up around that hole, but you haven't gone so far as to, you know, push that rubber gasket out from under the screw. So just remember that when you're driving these in, don't overdrive them. Just bring them in enough to plump up that gasket, and then you're done. And then the last thing I like to remember to do is to pre-apply my butyl tape on a panel, so that when I come up with the next panel, what I'll do is I'll line it up with my string. It'll be laying over the top of this ridge here, so that helps me also, you know, kind of lock in with this previous panel. And when I'm happy with the fit, I'll put a couple screws in the bottom to hold it in place. Then I'll kind of lift the edge back up, reach under, peel this protective strip off all the way up the panel, and then lay the new panel down. And as I'm walking up the roof to screw it in, I'll, you know, press down and try and seal that tape. And the butyl tape, this is considered optional in a lot of cases. Really what this is going to do, it's going to stop wind and wind-driven rain from working under this seam in the roof. And so I feel like it's important. This is actually very inexpensive. It's about $5 a roll for, I think, 50 feet. And this is just a good thing to do to, you know, ensure the weather tightness of the roof. So that's it for today. I got this first panel up. This was kind of my test panel, making sure everything fits. I like to pre-drill my holes. That way when I'm up on this roof, and this is a 712 roof, I don't want to be playing games getting screws started on a roof like this, because it'd be real easy to lose your balance and slip and slide right off. So I like to pre-drill all the screw holes in my panel. That takes a little bit of planning ahead of time, but I worked that out with this first panel. When I go to start the next batch of panels, what I'll do is probably stack up, well, I don't know, 6 or 8 of those panels, get them all lined up, and drill the whole group of them at once. Use a 1/8 inch hardened Irwin drill bit. They seem to make a pretty good bit that lasts a while, but when you do pre-drill your panels, it's a good idea to have a pack of those bits with you, because you probably will break them every once in a while when you're, you know, stacking them up and drilling them all at once. But I just really like the idea of pre-drilling. You know, you know exactly where the screw has to go, because you can see the hole. The screw starts real easy. No playing games up on a steep roof, and I think it's just a good way to go. So that's it for today. There's our drip line string. Key concept to remember, good way to install a high quality roof. Thanks for watching.